There was nothing new about the November weather in Glasgow as it poured incessantly. There was so much new about that night's match at Ibrox, however. A competition with a new name and branding, even its own Handel-inspired theme music. The logo was 8 stars in the shape of a ball, each of them representing the final 8 clubs in Europe's top competition. The first 8 clubs to walk onto this particular stage. European football in April was now guaranteed, and Rangers would earn just under £5 million, a not insignificant sum when the overdraft was now over £10 million. This was where the ambition and speculative investment had been leading, and Rangers had been at the heart of making it happen. To discuss just what happened, I'm joined by David Edgar. How are we?
I'm good, thank you. Can I get a quick tick of mine that has stayed with me for, 30 years now? And that is right at the first Champions League music, the first time I heard it, I think might have been um, on a. Do you remember the Friday night sports scene on Scott Sport? And I think they played a clip of it, and it went, as we all know, famously Zadok the Priest, and it goes the Champions, and I was like, well, it's not called that; it's called the Champions League. So I immediately started saying, because I was 14 and thought it was very funny, every time it goes the Champions, I go League.
Right.
And now in 2022, I still, whenever they do it, I have to say League immediately after it. So that's one. If I ever meet my 14-year-old self in a dream, I'm going to punch him.
And incidentally, just even 2 or 3 years into it, the UEFA wanted to change the music, and
Wow.
Campbell Ogilvie pleaded with them to not do that because it was already iconic, and they didn't. I'm also joined by Alan Bradley. How are we, Alan?
Yeah, I'm really good. David, with that confession, I held you in such high regard, and after you making that comment, I'm not so sure now. Martyn,
I,
could you maybe get Andy to jump in instead?
I am right. The
I
music
know.
only says champions, and quite clearly the competition is called the Champions League. Ergo, the music right from day one has been a total misnomer on almost every level. So, I think that no, I mean Martin's right. It was almost like, I'd loved European. Who hadn't? European football was so
Mhm.
exciting. I remember even as a child, and back then, folks, other Scottish people wanted all the Scottish teams to do I know, crazy as it was, and the games were all on the same night, and you really looked forward to it because even if your team weren't in it, as would happen, different stages and stuff, all the other games were on, and it was so exciting. These names, and we've spoken on this show about how the world these days is bigger because our horizons are so much further now. We can all go to places, we all visit places. I mean, how easy is it now to go for a weekend away? Maybe not this summer, but normally, how easy is it to go for a weekend away in Krakow or to visit Croatia for a holiday? That no chance back in the day. And you got these names, and I still remember to this day, names like, obviously for us, Ilves Tampere, or Boavista, or for Hearts,
And Karagusa and things, yeah,
uh,
ridiculous,
Va-
yeah.
Vardar Skorpje. But then this thing came along, and it's on the telly, and not just, it doesn't have to be a British team. They'll show you other games, and it was just the cream, the absolute cream of Europe. And now it's the mega tournament. Martin, you've argued before, and I think you're correct, that it's now the proving ground. It's not World Cups
Yeah,
anymore. The
Yeah.
Champions League is where it's at, and I think we all agree with that. And we're so used to it now that occasionally I think it does do us all good to step back and say, can you imagine what this thing was like when it landed? It felt like it came from a science fiction novel. It felt so futuristic and incredible.
Well, it was very different, and part of that, and this is not really a football thing, although it's going to determine how football is shaped over the next, well, until now, it's still going, was the new idea of a centralised media and marketing revenue pot in European football through UEFA. Because previously, the club hosted a European game, they'd take the gate receipts, and if they did a deal, an individual deal with sponsors on the trackside advertising or TV, then they would keep that money. But it was up to them to do whatever deal they wanted to do. Campbell Ogilvie talks about a game against Cologne, I think in 1982, and suddenly, not long before kickoff, there's a television strike in London, so the signal went down. and 30 minutes before kickoff, the game couldn't be shown. And Willie Waddle absolutely berating him in his office because he'd lost £60,000 of revenue. He had lost. He's nothing to do with it. Couldn't do anything about that. And his wife was driving home that night. Says someone was getting absolute dog's abuse in Mr. Waddle's offices. Aye, it was me. Now everything was put in the one pot. You were guaranteed that. You were guaranteed these revenues for 3 home games. No knockout, obviously, this time. And specific sponsors for every game. Just got into Ibrox that night. This is, of course, November 92. With the branding and the logos there and the advertising looking different from normal home games. David, did it again? This idea of the new, did that enter your mind as you walked in that night?
Yes, it very much did, because, as you said, the logo, which is now iconic, the stars, was everywhere around the stadium. If you see the pictures of it, and it did look very different. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't know too much about things like shared marketing pots and whatnot, but I'd read in the papers about how much it was guaranteed money now that we were going to get, which was obviously very exciting in terms of what we would then be able to do with it. But yeah, you just had a sense of occasion, because again, there's still that with any Champions League match, but not just for the team. If a team gets into the Champions League now, there's that sense of excitement for them and their fans, and it's probably picked up in their country. But there are a lot of groups, and really, in terms of this international feel to it, i.e. the world is watching, I think that happens in the later stages of it, when you're aware that everybody is watching Manchester City, Real Madrid, or whatever. Back then, there were 8 teams, 2 groups of 4. Every match, there were 4 matches a week, and every match was huge, and you were aware that this was being followed, and every country in Europe was watching this tournament, and you kind of felt like you were at an A-list party. And yeah, you're absolutely right, walking into Ibrox at a filthy night, incidentally. But is it just me, or all our early Champions League games, the weather was absolutely atrocious. But walking in, it looked different, it felt different, and it all just added up to the sense of the new and the sense of the possible, because we didn't know we couldn't do well in it. We didn't know it hadn't become a closed shop, it hadn't become what it is now. And look, this was not unique to us. Bruges felt this, Moscow felt that. Being there, there's 8 teams. Why not us?
And I guess just on this advertising thing, it's a bit different looking at boards about El Dorado and Scottish life pensions and stuff like that. And
Marshall's chunky chicken.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're obviously getting Ford and Amstel and whoever those early sponsors were. But even policemen standing in front of those advertising boards, UEFA officials going bananas because everything just needed to look absolutely pristine. Difficult to look pristine in that pishing wet night, which we'll come to in a moment. Rangers weren't just the only British club left in Europe's Premier competition, the only British club left in Europe by November 1992. Celtic, Hearts, Sheffield Wednesday all comfortably dismissed from the UEFA Cup. Graham Souness's Liverpool turned over by Spartak Moscow. Anfield talked about that a wee bit last week as well. So this new, well, not new territory, new branding, but we had the 2 groups of 4 last season. We just didn't get there. It was unseeded, but the reaction was good to the draw, both in Scotland and this newfound respect in England, that Rangers had a chance now of reaching the first European final since '72, basically because we weren't paired with AC Milan. I think that was pretty much the big miss, and the bonus was missing PSV and Romario, who were very dangerous as well. Still a tall order, of course, Alan. We knew very well what Marseille could do after that friendly. Club Bruges were the other ones. And the shock story of that second round, CSKA Moscow, who had sensationally put out the European Cup holders, Barcelona, in the Camp Nou, with 2-goal deficit that was overturned in the space of 17 crazy minutes there. So they were a bit of unknown quantity, I suppose, another danger, but to avoid Milan and I guess PSV, you couldn't. I mean, if Marseille had been drawn in that group as well, that would have been very nice. But you can't have everything, Alan.
No, I don't think so. And as you say, they were CSK Moscow, kind of the unknown. I think they were the kind of Soviet army team, weren't they, before obviously, the changes over there. But yeah, obviously them. I think the fact that we had beaten Leeds as well over the two legs too, as you say, you always go in with trepidation and, looking at some of these. But again, at that time, you're going, well, we've beaten the champions of England, albeit the way they were. Again, you don't know what can happen, can't you? I mean, we've seen it before with so many great clubs coming. And as David said, just actually being at this kind of A-list party, it's funny you mentioned as well, obviously, about the branding, and it just felt like a different stadium. But I remember you're talking, obviously, the Cologne one. I think we beat them 2-1. They beat us 5-0 over there at the game Campbell we talked about. But if you remember as well, it used to be the advertising. You would have all these German, adverts and so on, and that's where we would make money, from the kind of agreements with the various teams. But no, at that point in time, and because it's not even like me, but I think the majority of Rangers fans domestically, it was like, we're fine anyway. So it gave us this chance of, we're going to be okay domestically. Let's have a go at this one. And as David said, I mean, what you got Milan, Gothenburg, Porto, Eindhoven, and the other ones. So it's one of 8, and really it's up to it. We've got a chance.
On that Marseille, we'll start here. I think we need to be careful. Yes, we were blown away by them in the summer, David, and they had been in a European Cup final, 1991. So where we're talking now, just over a year ago, where they obviously lost in penalties to Red Star. But they're not turning up here in the best of form. They have lost a lot of discipline on and off the pitch. Basil Bole is becoming increasingly violent, and Bernard Tapie, who is of course the owner, makes a change on the eve of their league match against Strasbourg, and he removes Jean Fernandez, who said Rangers would have no chance in Europe, if you remember, in August, and he put basically the director of football, the Belgian 71-year-old Belgian Raymond Goethals, in full charge. He managed to guide them to a 2-2 draw, despite being down to 10 men after 39 minutes. Again, this disciplinary thing is a problem. So, arriving in this soaking wet Glasgow, they're not the all-conquering juggernauts that perhaps they would be painted, but they still had an awful lot of talent in their ranks, David.
Oh yeah, they did. Memories were still pretty fresh of what we'd seen, and again, going back to, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's true. It wasn't like you kept up really with the French league, apart from the odd newspaper clipping and maybe the football magazines that were kicking about at the time. But it wasn't like you were watching it every week and you were aware of it. Whereas I think now, if say PSG have a couple of dodgy results, you're aware and it's a discussion point, all the major leagues. So for us, the sort of memory of them was what we had witnessed at Ibrox. But you're right, they had made a change. They had this new owner who was, I don't think he was new at that point, but a new style owner is probably more accurate. And it's something we've become much more used to now, that when you have these owners that put money into a club, they pretty much do want instant success, and they don't play by what we considered back then were the rules. Like, you didn't sack a manager, you didn't change managers regularly, except in Italy, but we all understood that they were crazy and had their own system. But everywhere else, it wasn't the done thing. Everybody got a decent spell. But the team was just packed, absolutely packed with talent. And I think there had been a lot of articles in the Scottish press and a lot of discussion on Scottish radio about the similarities between the two teams, Murray and Tappy. Yeah. Unfortunately, that turned out to be a wee bit truer of a comparison than we hoped at that time. But Murray and Tappy, both in Adidas strips, both
going for 5 in a row.
Both going for 5 in a row. Both big names in Europe, but without being that, an AC Milan or a Liverpool or a Real Madrid. Both ambitious clubs who wanted to make that leap from being enormous clubs into being dominant, European dominant clubs. And there were similarities. There's no doubt. We'd both made a lot of signings. We'd obviously, Tappy and Murray knew each other. There was the Trevor Stephen back and forth. So there was a a narrative that you could spin. I almost said narrative Claxon. I'm so used to those two words coming together. But there was a narrative about these two clubs are very, very similar, and at the vanguard of this new competition, and at the vanguard of where football is going. And there was that real sense of kind of, that Spider-Man meme where the two of them are pointing at each other. There was a real element of that there. But as I say, in terms of football, we knew the names and we knew that they had quality. But our lasting sort of, I remember in the stands, and I wouldn't say it was trepidation because we were fairly confident we could beat anybody, but there was no lack of respect for them. And there was certainly nobody strolling in, giving it the comfort, 4-0 lads. There was none of that. We knew what we were up against because, they hadn't just played us off the park at Ibrox. I'm not sure that they'd allowed us on it for much of that match. So there was a sense of, well, that was a friendly, so they'll be magically worse at football and we'll be magically better. But I certainly think there was a lot of respect. And as I say, a kind of sense of we're trying to get somewhere and they're trying to get there too, and they're trying to therefore stop us getting there. So this is an opportunity for us to say to them, we're the big dogs.
Yeah, and Rangers had stopped winning finally. This incredible run of wins had ended with a draw at Tynecastle on the previous Saturday. There'd be a bit of a pattern about this. Rangers dropping points and draws just before or after these big European games. But again, McCoy scored that day, but he picks up a knock, so he can't play against Marseille. Ian Ferguson is suspended from a booking at Elland Road. The Rangers bench that night, Stephen Presley, Gary McSwiggan, Neil Murray, Ali Maxwell, and coming out of retirement to register is Davy Dodds, reserve team coach. That's our bench. Richard Gough plays, should have no business being anywhere near the pitch. He is not fit. And interestingly, Alan, looking at the programme, the Walter Smith talks about this new Champions League and getting to a final. And he says, look, my ambitions for Rangers must lead there. The experiences gained this time will help next time around. And I thought that was quite interesting. And it read to me as if, look, getting here has been great. The Leeds game will live forever. And we're going to make a lot of money here. We're going to gain a lot of experience, but this is probably a bit too soon for us.
Yeah, and I don't think it was mind games at all. It did sound as if, as you say, it was very much whether he was doing it as well to kind of manage expectations too, with the fans.
Very Walter thing to do, yeah.
And even with the players as well. It's like, look, just go out and relax. No one will be expecting anything. I don't know, but as you say, it did. It kind of jumped out a wee bit there, didn't it? It wasn't like a kind of defeatism, but yeah, it seemed a strange one. And obviously that would change as it went through, depending how results go and so on. But that one jumped out. And as you say as well, it was this, I think, did Neil Murray, did he actually start, I think, in the game as well, Martyn? I've got a feeling maybe he did too. But we're not having McCoy stay as well. Obviously, Big Haley was in his prime at that point in time. So, and as David said as well, what a miserable night. Yeah. And the park itself, I think, through obviously the months before, but it was almost going back to those kind of 70s things where it was kind of hit the ball and just try and get it over, some of the kind of water and so on.
Yeah, it was a horrible night. When that draw was made, Tappy was confident. We can reach the final again, he said. Our only problem is the Glasgow team.
Ball is through to Rudy Koller. Waiting up alongside him. Pele's gone into the middle. Needs to be picked up. Boxic! 1-0. Oh, that's a terrible blow for Rangers. It's on the way. Bowley collects. Sozi. Brown. Straight to Deschamps. Rangers fans very unhappy about that. Fowler nicking it wide to Dimeco. Sozi. Little touch in, Voller's after this one, and it looks as though Rudy Voller will make it 2. Well, sadly it was a mistake. by young Presley, and Voller, like a vulture, was onto that one once it had gone past Gorum. Instantly spraying a wonderful ball out there for Mikhailichenko. Hagley's gone into the middle, McSwegan's in there too. Will it come from McSwegan? There's his header, and he scores! What a substitution! His first touch of the ball, and he finds a glorious header from Mikhailichenko's cross and puts it in the back of the Marseille net. No foul. Rangers are coming for them again. This time Durant finding McSwegan. A lovely ball play with the outside of the boot. Durant again. The cross comes in, and it's in there. Mark Hagley has made it 2-2. A fabulous comeback by Rangers. What a night this is turning out to be. Durant again, so much the architect of it. Hagley, the wonderful scorer. And Rangers, against every odd, bring it back to 2-2.
The kid's got another touch in there, hasn't he? McSwegan, a great little give and go with Durant. And there goes Hagley, little deflection, but he's in there. This is unreal. This is absolutely unreal now, isn't it?
And who's to say they won't go on and finish the job now?
Okay, the match itself, we've got a lot to cover tonight, gents. So the common narrative, David, is that we were pulverised for 75 minutes, we're on the ropes, and then somehow got off them to bring this comeback to life. That's broadly true, I think, although the first half an hour was a lot more even than I think we remember. Miko had a really good chance to put us ahead. The first goal, that's Goff just not fit. He makes an error, tries to compensate, out of position, leaving Boksic in plenty of room. He didn't even need a second touch. It was outrageous. And then there's a big catastrophe from Presley, his replacement at half time. And a lot of fans thinking, God, we've paid up front for 3 games here. Maybe it's something better just to get knocked out in November. You don't have to watch this 6 times because this is a different class. The McSwegan change alters the game, but mainly because Durant is then deeper. And it's Durant that starts things moving in terms of Rangers being a better, more cohesive attacking force. You see Mikhailichenko tracking back and tackling and winning that ball for one of the goals. It was a crazy night, and I, as a 11-year-old, I'd never experienced. I wasn't at Kiev. I never experienced a noise quite like that. But watching the game back, what impressed me most actually was at 2-2 when it's, I think Brian Moore says to Ron Atkinson, you wouldn't bet against Rangers find the winning here, Brian. Marseille step up, and instead of battening down the hatches and just digging in, they go on the front foot. And they press Rangers back, and there's a god-awful moment where that ball just sticks in the mud, and Marseille could have well have snatched a third. But for the viewers at home, and at home being the whole of the UK, and this is a feature of this first Champions League run, is that the entire country is apart from half of Glasgow and half of Scotland, is betting on Rangers, really. It's getting invested on us. And the guy who wrote the book on this season, The Fix, he's from the south of England. He said, I was hooked, absolutely hooked at just this entertainment, and from then on, I couldn't get enough of this. It was quite the start.
Martyn, sorry, David, just a wee quickie before you. My boss lived in Southampton, and he used to always talk about this. I think that we put ourselves down, and I know obviously Marseille, you said the total quality of it. But to me, always you've got to think of Rangers under the floodlights and so on. And I know we'll go, yeah, we were lucky. But we get the 2-2, against them under the floodlights and so on. And I think even the one later on when we get around to, I don't know, sometimes it was like, you talk about you sign a player, and if he's got an Italian name or a Spanish name, we go, oh, fantastic, as opposed to maybe a kind of British one. So I don't know. I just feel at times we tend to kind of underestimate potentially what we can do in these type of situations. Sorry, David.
I'll let you come in on that as well, Davey. there's a narrative here, Alan. We play football in this tournament, football, for half a game away in Belgium and half away at home against Bruges.
Yeah, and we end up 1 point behind the team, the super
I know,
fantastic
but there's more than one way to skin a cat in one cup competition.
Look,
over the course, as we are going to find out over the course of this series, that spirit and energy and good old British pluck and 4-4-2 can well only take you so far, because by the summer our players are broken.
Yeah, but we do not too bad during this competition in terms of where we started, where we finish, and obviously someone goes to the final. But I think if you look at in amongst the 4 teams, I think overall, well, people would look back. I think it was relatively successful in this particular one anyway.
It's more than relatively successful. It was very successful. It was very impressive. It was the greatest season. And it was a very special season, and the relative achievement is probably as good as it's got, to be honest, given the relative level of the competition compared to other things that we've been involved in. But let's not rewrite history in terms of the quality that we showed.
I'm not talking about quality. I'm just talking about punching above our weight and the capability at times to play against teams who are far technically better than us and so on.
Right.
It's countering technique. Yeah.
I'll come in here, right? I know what you're both saying, and you're both right, as can often happen. Firstly, was this something that was picked up in England? Yes, because it was new, it was glamorous. Rangers knocked out Leeds. Rangers had a lot of English players. There are a lot of 90s people who have a soft spot for Rangers in England. Anytime you've ever worked in there, you'll know that. And a lot of it is part of this. Also, the whole British thing and whatnot. So, yes, very much so. As Alan said, Ibrox Under the Lights is amazing, and it was all brand new. So that was all very good. In terms of what you're both saying, technically these teams had players above us, but we weren't in that area of cringe yet about, oh my god, we can't do what they do. That pluck you mentioned, Martyn, this is only 1992, and although when we get older, we divide decades into the 80s, the 70s, the 90s. British pluck you spot about had dominated Europe for years, where we all knew, these teams are better passers than us, but we'll run over the top of them. So that was still very much a thing. This is not, to Alan's point, this is not a run to Manchester style performance in this. This is not just pluck and
it's not a Juventus coming and laughing at us and things like that.
No. This is exactly. It other times in these matches where Marseille are passing at a level that we go off. Other times when Bruges do it in that game at Ibrox, absolutely. But then they can't match our ferocity, our drive, our intent when we are on the front foot. So I think that again, we're at this really interesting point in history where we're not quite in the new era, but nor are we fully in the other. It's a little bit like, these American tourist things where you can stand in one state and with one foot and stand in the other. It's a little like that. This is where we are at this point with that. To the game itself, you're right, Martyn. That broad definition is right, although the first half hour was bad. I love Richard Gough. To me, he is the Rangers captain. But he had a really frustrating habit, and Walter allowed him, of declaring himself fit for matches and then limping off after a poor performance where he was quite clearly injured. This was not the last time, or this was not the first time or the last time this would happen. Because Walter would say to him, "Are you fit?" And he'd say, "Yes," because what do footballers say when they want to play in a game? "I'm fit, I'll give it a go." And you're absolutely right. It's just poor. I loved Boxic, by the way. I just thought he was. He's one of these underrated guys that seems to have fallen out of fashion a wee bit. But what a player! And you're right, that touch is magnificent. The second's a disaster. I'll hold my hands. I was never a big Presley guy. The fact that he's gone on to be a colossal fanny of a human being probably helps. He once gave his digs when he was a Rangers the youngster were in co-winning, and he once gave me and my mates a row in his Rangers shell suit because we were hanging about the swing park outside the spa, and he was telling, which was notorious for certain illicit substances being able to purchase it, and he told us we were wasting our lives. So, you know, when you get a row from a Rangers centre half, albeit the reserve one, it's you know, when you're 14, that's hard to take in. So I never really cared for him, and he doesn't have a good match. But I don't think there was ever the sense that we were completely out of it. I think maybe it was blind hope. I don't know. But if they got a third, fine, right? Everybody would have rolled
I
up the
don't know
carpet.
about that. We looked. Bearing in mind again the injuries.
I know, but did you honestly think that if we can just get, you didn't think if we can just get one, you never know. I'm not saying that everybody was going, we're definitely going to come back, but nor I think had anybody just went, right, fine, it's about keeping the score down. Then, you know, McSwegan's header, which is, let's be honest, it's a fluke. That's the way I head a ball when I go, I'm going to have to head it, and I shut my eyes and throw my, you know, that's a striker who's better with his feet, but it takes that amazing loop and it goes in. Haley's header's an absolute beauty, by the way.
Yeah, to get down there.
Was that Andy Gray? Mind Andy Gray used to go down for those where he should have kicked it. Haley was the same, wasn't it? Yeah.
There's a lot going on there. First of all, the decision to head it rather than kick it, because that's a split-second thing. And then secondly, the ability to get down there and guide it the way he does. And Ibrox was rocking. I fully expected us. A couple of cliches went out the window that night. Firstly, at the start of the game, the old guy that sat next to us said, the foreigners don't like these conditions, as if it never rains in France, right? And it turned out that they were perfectly comfortable in these conditions. You know, no, the shite pitch and the pissing rain was not a leveler. And the other one was, which is it's a cliche, but generally it's for a reason. Or the momentum's with us now. They'll be a bit shell shocked. You know, they were cruising, as you say, Martyn, in their minds. Now it's 2 each. Place is going barmy. We could go on and win this, and they went, no, actually. Right,
we'll drop a gear and we'll go again.
We'll go get real class, and they were real top class teams. Don't panic in those circumstances. What a real top class team is they say, look, we believe in what we do. We haven't been doing it for this crazy 5-10 minute spell. Let's take it. And if you watch the game back, there's a couple of minutes where they're not herring after the way we would when we, in that circumstance where we've got to get back right away. We have to score because it's gone 2 each. They take a couple of minutes of just knocking the ball about to each other, making sure we don't have it. Just dying the crowd down a little, and then you're right. Then they go forward, and then it's actually us who are under the cosh. Look, you'll never ever be able to take away the words cheating bastards from a Rangers fan's mind when we're talking about Marseille, but that's not to denigrate the players that they had on the field were top quality players. I mean, remember Abedi Pele, again another guy that's just fallen out of discussions, but these guys were terrific, and again they had that mentality. You mentioned, Martyn, they're going for 5 in a row. They know how to get over a line. They've got confidence in their ability to do that, and they ride out the storm. They take a couple of minutes to regroup, reset, and then I was glad the final whistle came when it did. But it still felt amazing, by the way, just because of it was a decent result given the level of opposition. But the way it had come about, the way that Rangers had hung it. And yeah, look, you are celebrating because we're British and we like, especially at Rangers, we like those qualities of determination, fight, heart, spirit. We like all that. But there was skill in there as well. You don't get a 2 each draw against a side like that just because you're prepared to run about a bit.
Yeah. Well, a few things. A few things. 2-2, there's no away goals, right? And I think we left saying, right, well, we're in a league here, we're in a group. We're going to probably have to take full points out the next 3 games and hope that they drop something, because going to France and try to win is maybe going to be too tall an order. But we're in this, and certainly 65 minutes we were not. We hardly had a pulse. In terms of the technique thing, Alan, Ian Durrant's the exception, because he, as I said, I think he changes the game just from that drop back into midfield, and he will pop up throughout this whole campaign doing things that these other teams do.
Yeah.
And there's probably, in fact, no, there's no probably, there isn't another Rangers player that can use the ball like he does.
I think he plays 9 out of 10 of the European ties, and he was just so suited, wasn't he? Just the
Time
class
in the
of
ball, he
it.
would say all the time, I've got time in the ball here. It's not at Scotland where it's absolutely up and at him. And Alan, you were correct about Neil Murray, of course, apologies for that. It was David Hagan that was on the bench. Again, though, the utter threadbare nature by November of this Rangers squad, because folk are just kind of dropping like flies. It's not going to get any easier, Alan. Where it gets to is Bochum in Germany. It was supposed to be in Santander. That was the first neutral venue for the CSKA Moscow game. Couldn't be played in Moscow in December because it is a little too cold. But then it got moved to Bochum, just outside Dusseldorf. Talking about match fixing and things like that, obviously with Marseille, CSKA shouldn't probably have been in this competition. They had to take the week before the opening round of the European Cup, Champions League qualifiers, whatever. Had to take out a front page advert in the paper and apologise for their complicity in domestic match fixing in recent years. The former coach said, when I was with CSKA, matches were fixed. The outcome was known before the final whistle. This is the team of the military. Some of the players still held ranks there and could do anything they wanted. Money was offered to these players and they could not resist the temptation. UEFA never blinked, but it would not be the last time they'd be tested like that. The game itself, Alan, I mean, a deflected goal, given us the points, wouldn't be the first, that wouldn't be the last time, sorry. We'll hear that story from Ian Ferguson, another player who's coming into the season for sure. But the first 5-10 minutes, again, it's heart attack stuff. Alan scrambling, the first minute, scrambling balls off the line.
It wasn't just bodies everywhere, Martyn, wasn't it? And we're actually lucky to get, kind of through the earlier stages without them getting a first goal. Yeah,
kind of typifies this run, really. There's a bit of fortune there. There's a bit of harem scarum, a deflected goal, a lot of nerve just to hold on to that because it's an early goal. A lot of time to to kind of hang on to that result. But John's obviously not on this show. John was there. He wasn't one of the soldiers. He was one of the travelling support. Big British Army base near there. They I think it's about 6,000 Rangers fans who were there, made up quite heartily by the army guys. But John says, look, after this, it was like, right, watching Rangers go away and just do a job
and
in
just
Europe is new, and we're in this,
Yeah, I mean, Ian Ferguson obviously scoring the goal as well, but this particular season too, we've talked about Durant, but he showed up quite a lot now, Fergie as well, and again, just doing that dirty stuff, that he did so well, didn't he? So yeah, he was kind of one of the goodies. I think with me as well, I think CSK Moscow, it was that unknown quantity, and I think after the game as well, getting the points from it, it did feel as if we're onto something because we thought when others come to play them, they are going to get some kind of difficulties. So, no, at that point in time, and especially after the coming back at Marseille, things were looking, I thought, pretty good anyway. And as you say, I think it was about 6,000 or something British troops here, so great atmosphere. So, no, I mean, overall enjoyed that one. But you could see as well, between injuries and so on as well, I don't think Hustra played. It was Mikhailchenko at that point in time as well, wasn't it?
Okay, 2 games gone, a win and a draw, and an away win as well. Not bad going at all. In the other group, David, AC Milan are flying, 2 wins out of 2, very comfortable. And Franco Baresi, who's the captain, said the start was expected. We're a team which is everything, and I'm certain we will be in the final. When the European Cup began, Rangers were not one of the fancied teams, and I've been surprised by the results. Now, though, I believe we will play them in the final. Club Brugge and the Russians are not good enough, and Olympique Marseille are not as strong as before. Rangers would pose problems. When Italy played Scotland last month, I found their style of play hard to handle, and so did my teammates. We have the final in sight now, but we do not have the European Cup in our grasp, despite what so many people are saying. Rangers will be a threat to us. Now, this sounds, well, one of those kind things that the pleasantries that opposition players give us sometimes, David, but it wasn't that fanciful. We're in December now of 1992. The World Soccer prestigious football magazine awards had just taken place. Rangers were placed the 5th best team in the world. Ahead of Brazil, Argentina, Germany, Holland. Only Denmark, Milan, Barcelona and Sao Paulo were more admired. Walter Smith was voted the 7th best manager in the world, and Ali McCoist was the 7th in the World Player of the Year award behind Koeman, Brian Laudrup, Thomas Hasler, Peter Schmeichel, Dennis Bergkamp, and of course, Marco van Basten. This is bizarre to be thinking along those lines, David, but this again is that the emotional impact that this particular year of 1992 has had for anyone following Scottish football. And again, Sky are becoming a wee bit more involved. We took back to that Scottish Cup semi-final from the late March, and now that this impact in the Champions League Battle of Britain, respect again, finally.
Yeah, it's bizarre now. It wasn't bizarre then. We kind of expect, we were not the ugly girl who takes off her glasses in a movie and is revealed to be beautiful. We kind of had a bit of swagger about us, and we were, we should be talked about at that sort of level, that sort of company. The Baresi thing was interesting because it was genuine. It wasn't, as you say, it was him looking at it saying, "Look, Marseille." He would be wrong there, obviously, but it was him looking at that saying, "Look, that's a kind of style that we know and we're quite comfortable with." But also remember, Baresi knew Haitley, was a big admirer of Haitley and what Haitley could do, and I think there was a sense that Rangers were something different, something they didn't come across. And as I mentioned earlier, these guys it's not far removed from watching teams like Rangers win European Cups, Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa, playing a very traditional British style. Manchester United re-entry back into Europe, win the Cup Winners' Cup. So there was that sense of British football's a bit of an island, no pun intended, but it's different to what we come up against in the continent. Stylistically, we are more comfortable in playing these sides, and again, the results were speaking for themselves. As we've discovered over the years, any away win in the Champions League is something to be enjoyed. Any away win in Europe is something to be embraced. And there was just a sense of momentum. There was just a sense of it's building. We have knocked out the English champions here as well. So it's not just about the results that we've had in terms of in the group stage. We do have this large fella in the cap who we've beaten home and away. And people are looking at it and they're thinking, now, I'll be totally upfront, this was maybe my Serie A fanboy in me. The only team in this that I, in my heart, didn't believe we could beat was Milan. Because that side was otherworldly. They had the best defence that I've still probably ever seen. And then they had Marco van Basten, who was just I pick a superlative and chuck it at them and it fits. So for me, they were the one that I was needing people to say to me, well, in a 90-minute one-off, you never know, that kind of thing. Whereas I did genuinely believe that we had it in us to beat anyone else in the competition. But I think you're right. It became pretty clear early doors that I think there was always an assumption from everyone right at the start, from the other 7 teams really, before the draw's made, they'll be in the final. So ideally, we don't want to be in their group, and then we'll take our chances in a one-off game. They were the 2010 Barcelona, the 2019 Liverpool. They were the team that everybody looked at and went, aye, they are miles ahead. But he was looking at that, I think, legitimately and saying, oh, that'll be a challenge because that is different to what we come up against week in, week out. And it is difficult to adapt. And they have Haitley, who Italians massively admire, that type of striker. They'd had him over there for a bit.
They would know about Mikhailichenko as well and so on.
Yeah,
some of the other internationals,
but with Haitley, there's always been an attraction in Italian football. They actually really admire that big rampaging number 9.
Attila the Hun, as he had.
They always admire. If you look, Paul Ryder has a spell in Italy as well. They really, because they don't produce that type of forward. So there's always been a kind of admiration of what we would consider a big British traditional number 9, and Hateley was an amalgam of that and the continent and the stuff he'd picked up there. So, yeah, I think he was kind of looking at it and saying, ideally, we'd prefer not to play them. I'm not sure about Marseille aren't quite as strong as they were. They weren't maybe in the best of form at the start of that season, but they were still pretty decent. And he was right, the other two were capable of moments, but they weren't going to be good. They wouldn't be troubling Milan.
Injuries refusing to subside. Goff again missed the trip to Bochum. Gary Stevens was involved in a horrendous injury. A dreadful tackle by Paul Jack and a 0-0 draw with Airdrie at the start of December. That set him back significantly. I'm not entirely sure he ever really
No, he didn't.
was ever the
Not
same
in his
player
full
again.
career.
It wasn't
No.
the same.
We're kind of treading water a wee bit domestically over this winter period. But again, with these injuries, it's a bit of a problem. Some Ibrox pipes burst before a visit to Dundee United in December. Maybe deliberately, I'm not so sure. Snow hit the northeast later in the month. We're supposed to go to Pittodrie. So those games were off. Gave us a kind of welcome breather. But
Can I ask you both a question then about this point? You mentioned there a very interesting phrase, treading water. I don't know about you guys, but was there I certainly had a wee sense of, right, back to Scottish football. It was kind of like getting home for your holidays, wasn't it? And
yeah,
I don't know. It just, this seemed all sparkling and glam, and then we had to do it, and we expected to win, well, the treble really. But I don't know. I just had this. Did you guys feel that?
I used to walk out. I still remember David walking out of the Eastern Closure and always just talking and saying, "We've got such and such during the week," or "That's okay." Or I think we'd mentioned to Martyn too. Maybe you would draw and you would say, "Aye, but the big one's this." And then it was the same after it too. Then you would go, "Right, it's the big one. Oh, it's this," as you say, this domestic thing. We'll kind of get by. And even going home as well. And Margaret saying, "Oh, cool, that was good. You done all right today." I'm like, not really. It suddenly became Champions League was like everything, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And this was just other kind of. It was something we kind of had to go through at that point in time, but it took so much, didn't it? The distinction between the two of them.
Yes and no, David. Yeah, I mean, this was greatly exciting, and wow, okay, it looked like we could get a pasting here every week in this thing. To all of a sudden being we could get to the final, very, very, very quickly. But again, come back to the injuries. This isn't feeling how it did in that 18-day spell that John and Andy and I discussed last week, when we were just winning every single game, these big game after big game. The squad was kind of together. There weren't many injuries. It just looked like this Rangers team could not be stopped. And we drop a point. Never mind anything else. This is the biz. I felt, well, we're hanging on here, to be honest. And I remember, because the Aberdeen trip was supposed to be the day after my birthday, and I was supposed to be going as a Wednesday night. It was getting picked up, bang on, school bell going, and wasn't up to Aberdeen. But that getting pied, I do remember thinking, right, that isn't the worst. Because
you're the only 11-year-old boy in the world who, on hearing a postponement, which means he can't go to a football match, goes, "Oh, that might be a good thing."
Well, I did go, and we will come to it in a minute. But we were not. David Dodds is in the fucking bench.
I know. No, I'm not.
We are not in a good place here.
We've got 10 wins and 3 draws in a run, and nobody's going to catch us, are they?
No, that's it. We touched on this 2 weeks ago. What Alan said is that it doesn't matter. We're going to win the league, right? Yeah. Even if we have a couple of bad weeks, we're going to win the league. They're not going to catch us. So, maybe it was a slight age thing. But for me at this point, the league it wasn't just an expectation, it was a formality. So
it pretty much was. But going to Pittodrie with players missing is not what you want. Certainly going to Bruges with players missing is definitely not what you want. So I was happy enough that gets parked for a wee bit. Let's get Ali back. Let's get the skipper back. Let's get actual players back in the team, so that we can kind of get on with this, because it felt that night in Bochum anyway, just about hanging in there, and we probably could be doing with just leaving that until we got through this period. No real danger of getting through this period. We might have lost to Pittodrie in that original Wednesday night. It wouldn't have mattered too much. January, January's interesting. The Old Firm game, we win 1-0. Trevor Stephen gets pushed up front because McCoy's injured, and I think the boys have a wee bet on him because they knew and no one else did that he would be playing for the start at 16 to 1 to get the opening goal, which he did, the only goal. A very clever, I was going to say chested header, that makes absolutely no sense, but you know what I mean. It was just comforted into the back of the net. Rangers were dreadful that day, absolutely minging. But we won 1-0, and Richard Goss said after, it's sort of like a Rolling Stone thing. We were just not going to be easily stopped, even if we're not in full flow. We're still going to keep moving, and we did. There's a wee bit more entertainment. The Dundee United game is a 3-2 win. We go to Easter Road and win 4-3. So there are some thrills in there. But when the Aberdeen game finally gets played at the start of February, well, this is what happened.
Chances on through the middle. It's brilliant goalkeeping by Gorham. Richardson with a free kick. McLeish has gone forward. So is Irvin. Matalainen nodding it across. And a great save again from Gorham. Ian just holds his head. He can't believe it. There he goes. Straight against the wall. Stephen sends it back in. There's Hakely. It's in. Rangers have scored. It's a sucker blow from Rangers. And the Rangers supporter, I'm sure, can scarcely believe that. In the context of a game in which Rangers have had a mauling, they've taken the lead. Trying that now against Andy Gorham. Two good efforts, it sticks on the line. Well, Gorham has been outstanding all night, and now he's had a stroke of luck.
We spoke about this, David, a wee bit in our Andy Gorham immediate kind of reaction tribute show. This is the game I think of. Even we're going to obviously cover a lot of Old Firm games over the next couple of months. Again, this was not a good Rangers performance. We deliberately invited a lot of pressure, maybe with the confidence that, well, we've got a great goalkeeper. He was outstanding, and we have one chance, and the big man does the business. And we were absolutely hanging on, literally hanging on. I mean, going through his legs and
I was going to say, even we have one chance, he should still have saved it.
Oh, it's
Elders. Yeah. It's a good header.
But it's a good header, but I would, if our goalie had let that one in, then we'd be wanting Walter on the phone with the Rothman's book picking a goalie the next day. Look, this is such a classic Rangers performance of that era. It's a must-win game, right? Look, again, I still don't think if Aberdeen had won,
must win for them.
Yeah, must win for them. Yeah, but even so, for us, just to buy yourself some room, right? And we were very good in Walter's time.
It was like Parkhead after Leeds, Davey, wasn't it? The same.
Very good at just doing enough. And the problem long term with that would be that mentality set in with the players of we'll be all right on the night, and we were all right in the night right up until not winning 10 in a row. But I mean, we get battered. And look, this was not a typical Aberdeen performance that season. They hadn't been as consistent as they had been in previous years, but they were still a good side. I hate to dust this down, but it's true. Certainly on their day, and it was Rangers at home. It had been building up for a couple of months, and as you say, Martyn, for them it's like we have to win this. Just no ifs, no ands, no buts, and they pretty much do everything they can. I don't know if it's a tactic to say we've got a good goalkeeper, because I don't think even you can rely on. Well, you probably could in this season, and Andy Gorham to play like that, but my God, he was just incredible.
You know how you get compilations of, say, Gorham, and it's all these different games? You could just say to people,
one for that game,
have a look at that.
Aye. Well, this is the thing we mentioned on the Andy Gorham tribute, that a lot of his reputation rests on what he would later do against Celtic, but for me it was forged versus Aberdeen, who were the better side at the time, and these were the bigger matches. And for me, it was. And we talk about Hateley, hammer of Celtic, which he absolutely was, but he loved he loved breaking Aberdeen hearts up there, didn't he? And you know, there is this belief in the side at the moment, I think, lads, of we'll get a chance, you know, and when we get a chance, one of them will take it. That belief in each other. But I don't think you can call this, you know, there's certain games at Parkhead you can call it a defensive masterclass. This was a defensive masterclass because they ripped us open.
Yeah, they really did. Yeah.
You didn't have XG back then, but if you did, Aberdeen's was pretty high. They met a goalkeeper who, for my money, and I've said this, and I'll never be dissuaded from this, at that point is the best goalkeeper in the world. And he's making save after save after save. And then when Rangers get that goal, and there's the fundamental difference. Our keeper would not make an error like that, and their keeper could not produce that amount. He could produce great saves, but he could not. He probably needed, you know, he was probably shitting himself or something, literally and figuratively. But it's a tense game. They have to play. But I just remember that night thinking, "This is what we do." You know, this is what we do. And I taped it. We were at the game. I taped it, and because it was on Sportscene at like 10:30.
Yeah, it was.
After it, and I taped it. And when I got in, even though I'd school the next day, which I think I might have dogged, but by the way, if my dad's listening, I'm sorry, I dogged it the next day after promising him I wouldn't. I did, but I watched it when we got in. And yeah, just was that as dogged as I thought it was? Yeah. That's a really polite way of saying, did we get battered, nick a goal, and our goalie was superb? But the fact is, it's not luck when a team does that in a big game as often as this Rangers team did. That is what do you want to call it? A winning mentality, a flex? I don't know. But when you do it time after time, it's not luck.
Have you seen us celebrating in all of the goals, whether it would be Durant, whether it would be this one with Hateley? We're laughing. All these teams are thinking, Rangers, this is it. This is our game. We've got to do it. We've got to do it. And then every time we score, and we're just laughing, and they're going, they're doing it again. And there's a pattern all the time. And it's just, we just managed to up it, didn't we? And do this one, yeah.
I think that's a really good point. I think that there is a sense that certainly isn't when we come to do next season, everything's a slog, right? This next season's a hangover. This season and
psychologically, we're way above them, aren't we?
This is the party, absolutely. Our guys are loving it. They're loving it, and yeah, they're having to struggle and they're having to fight. But you know, yeah, you can see a team that has been moving in the right direction for a couple of seasons under Walter in particular. And I think there's just this. I was going to say confidence, but I think there's this knowledge that we're going to do it, this surety, this certainty that we're going to do it. And as I say, it can't last forever. Next season, although they are still doing it when they need to, everything felt like it was, trying to push a boulder up a hill. Whereas this season, as you say, Alan, they're laughing, they're having fun, they're high-fiving, they're loving what they're doing, and there's just this sense of momentum and destiny, and they're caught up in the whirl. For younger
You're feeling
listeners,
that too, aren't we? As fans, we're the same. We're just like, here we go again, isn't it?
Yeah. For younger listeners, I'd compare it to our European run last year, where it just picked up and it just got mad, and you felt like you were in the centre of this epic whirl. That's what this whole end because there's still months to go, but that's what this whole second act of that season from, as you mentioned, Martyn, that Aberdeen game with the 3-1 at Ibrox. The whole of it just felt like this, like rolling down a hill when you're a kid and laughing as you pick up speed and loving it. And you might be hurtling into danger, but you don't care. You just have this enormous sense of fun and freedom and loving it. And that was absolutely it. And of course, we do get to the bottom and hit a wall, and that's 93-94, but that was the future. That wasn't our problem, 92-93.
As a brief interlude then, gents, from the Scottish Premier Division, let's talk about the Scottish Super League, which was also over. These plans were scuppered by Celtic. They withdrew from a group of 10 rebel clubs, no pun intended, wanting to work within the existing Scottish Football League, but to, again, find solutions to the problems that we had discussed a couple of weeks ago, guys. They didn't tell the other clubs. It came through the press. Ian Donald, the vice chair of Aberdeen, the kind of spokesperson for the Scottish Super League, was furious. Can't believe they've done this. Feel shell-shocked. They've now lost all credibility. If this is how they want to conduct business, then they deserve all the criticism they get. I couldn't trust them again, any of them. If Celtic want to become the champions of the first and second division clubs, then let them go and play there. Now, the SFL's plan was for 3 leagues of 14, 12, 12, with the Premier Division splitting into A and B after they've played each other twice, so after 26 games, a wee bit earlier than our split now. But after a winter break and with 0 points, they'll start again. So a kind of springtime 10-match mini-league to decide the title. This was vetoed, and they never really got anywhere. The compromise was for 4 leagues of 10, and that would come in 94, 95. Celtic's thought process is interesting. You would have thought a club on its uppers as it was then would have wanted a wee bit more financial control, greater revenue streams, etc., but perhaps needing a use of a stadium while they get theirs fixed might have been more of a pressing concern, and also the attraction of basically a 10-match attempt to try and win a title. Within 18 months, Celtic would get the use of Hampden for a season, and for very little. Our last chance to really do this, Alan, following England's lead, and we never really got back to it, despite how we've dressed it up over the years.
No, you're right. I had a wee look at it, Martyn, and they were looking at starting for 94, 95. Obviously, ourselves, Hearts, Aberdeen, Dundee United, and at the time Celtic. I think Hibson St Johnstone potentially were going to go on too. But the plan was, it was like 100,000 quid at the time to join. There's going to be 8 clubs to start with, going to 14 eventually. No relegation for the first couple of years, and then a play-off and so on. But they were going to set up their own company. And I think the funniest thing I saw, Martyn, was they were going to, you could sell pens and mugs with the SSL logo. So that was their marketing strategy, or their Marcoms. I couldn't believe that, but that was actually.
Do you think they wee gonks at banks have? The wee funny things with the sticker SSL.
But that's what they said. Sell pens and mugs with the SSL logo. And they were going to set up a company, SSL. But what they wanted as well was 3 points away, 2 for a home win and 1 for a draw. There was also fans were going to select 2 Super League All-Star teams each year, and the proceeds were going to go to the Scottish FA. 2 weeks shut down in January, except a New Year card, so people play at New Year. Super League was going to replace the Skull Cup, and there's going to be a British Cup with the 5 original clubs here and 11 English ones. A maximum transfer fee between the SSL clubs, and there would be no transfers through the rest of the season. But the other kind of funny, over and above the pens and the mugs, were Not The View were absolutely ripping into Kevin Kelly, saying, here's David Murray and Wallace Mercer, who know things need to change. Kelly, you were meant to be part of it. They actually were majorly critical of him, obviously, and how things didn't go through. But so, David, Tat, I don't know, mugs and pens, sound good?
Yeah, Tat is always welcome. I cannot believe. Did you say that they actually included that in the brochure?
Yes, yeah. That was an example of it, yeah.
That is absolutely wild. Look, there's some good things and some bad things, as always happens. But the idea of let's make, many did you say, Martyn, 26 games utterly pointless.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not. I really.
That was the SFLs.
That's what I mean.
SFLs,
Somebody will need to explain to me the attraction and how that was to be sold as a thing.
Yes, for mid-table teams to fight your way into contention to go and have a small crack at a title, I guess.
Yeah, it's brilliant for them, but for the teams who are going to reach it, then
what's the point in the first so many months?
Yeah, exactly. You accumulate some points and then you just wait. No, very, very silly idea, and I can understand why the SSL. The thing about the change, there is always a need for a change, but there is a sense in any business when somebody says we need change, and it usually it's because it is needed, that let's dream big, let's blue sky this, right? And then you come up with radical ideas, and it's a little bit like that old syllogism. It's, we need to do something. This is something. Therefore, we need to do this, and it becomes holy writ. And in fact, you need to take a step back and say, actually, these aren't good ideas. The comment I found really interesting there was what you said that Ian Donald said about Celtic. If they conduct this, they deserve all the criticism they get. That to me indicates Celtic's joke club status and the way that they were run was so endemically woven through Scottish football that it was just now taken for granted. And somebody saying, well, an outsider saying, aye, well, I'd heard how much of a joke they are, and it turns out it's true. That kind of tells you where they are. Look, change was needed. The problem that we have in Scotland that has stymied and will continue to stymie is you have to work out a way where you can service the demand for 4 fixtures a year and for other clubs to get as many fixtures against the old firm as they possibly can. We have an awful lot of clubs, maybe too many undoubtedly too many for a country our size, and that's what draws you back. But I mean, the 90s weren't that long ago that your marketing plan should have included guys will be going to work and in their top pockets next to the Bible will be an SSL pen, and they'll go, wow, SSL, I'm going to buy me some tickets for the weekend. That is a complete and utter afterthought. Surely it's not something that you do. But again, people were at least trying something. The SFL then fall into the trap with their, as I say, rather stupid idea of, oh, you want big, do you? Well, how about this? This has never been done anywhere else. Yeah, probably
For a
with
reason.
good reason.
Yeah. It's the TV thing, isn't it? It's the ability to do better deals, because, well, look what's happening down there. We are going to get swallowed up if we don't market our game better. We think we know how to market our game better than the kind of bowling club chairman that run the SFA and the SFL and are in the Scottish football and bureaucracy. It's exactly the same conversations that took place in England. It was the clubs that broke away, and it didn't happen. And, well, that was that. Back to football, all my childish naivety, David, thinking that we'd have players back for the trip to Belgium, dashed. We're back in March the 3rd, at the away game in Bruges. Supposed to be playing behind closed doors because of the behaviour of the Bruges fans in Marseille. Now, I was there that night, so that would have robbed me of my first European trip, but perhaps in retrospect it wouldn't have been a bad thing, because that old, and it was creaking, it very much was creaking, stadium was ferocious inside, and Rangers were reeling. No Gough, no Stevens, no Trevor Stephen, Ian Ferguson, Dale Gordon, Durant only making the bench. Again, you're throwing parts together, and although McCoy sits the bar at one stage in the first half, we're battered. I think Hateley has to head one off the line. Miko has a very weak attempted clearance, and Bruges score from that. But in the second half, I don't know where the switch came from. Maybe it's back to that Aberdeen thing in September. Rangers are just tremendous.
Neil Murray was superb.
Neil Murray, the people on the plane home were talking about the future of Scottish football being Neil Murray, the way he passed the ball, directed things, and McCoy and Hateley chances, they were all spun. The only person that didn't spun it finally was Peter Hoostra. He took it very well, and that Rangers end went absolutely mental. We got back in the bus, found out that Marseille had drawn in Moscow, 1-1. So no ground lost in that. Rolling Stone continuing its momentum. I would argue that, and I have done in previous shows, that this was the most costly night of our entire season.
I agree, absolutely. Yeah.
Where we had the most opportunities, we're playing the best football on a night where Marseille had slipped, and we could get ahead. We had McCoy and Hateley, so there's no that excuse for once. They were there, they just didn't do the biz, and that was the one. Andy Gorham was involved in a collision with Amikachi and Dave McPherson. I think they kind of fell on him, and his posterior ligament, we've talked about this before, the one at the back of the knee. I mean, he can't train.
Amikachi was a big guy.
He was a big lad.
Dave McPherson was 6'4".
Yeah. So Gorham's playing matches, and that's it. And getting
that's
strapped
where the
up.
bandage comes in. Aye.
Exactly, aye. So, and again, we're just we went to Perth, I think, the following midweek. Again, I was up there that night as well. McCoy Schools. We draw 1-1 with St Johnstone, but we're pretty poor. We're hanging in there, lads. But I mean, a game of two halves. It's the most cliche of all football games, really. This one, but this is it. This is where I think we blow it. We had the players up front that should have done the buzzer.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, you're right. And especially after us coming back from Marseille and managing to get that, the kind of great point at home, but not to have gone out this, and we should have, turned it around and went for a 2-1, and then, as you say, that Rolling Stone is just going to keep going and going, from then on. So, I used to put it away as well. Actually, right-footed as well for.
I know,
yeah. But absolute cracker, yeah. And as you say, Neil Murray as well at that point in time, yeah.
He was sensational, and he looked at he was growing into something that unfortunately he never did. Here's something I'm going to be controversial. I've moaned about this before, and I'm going to moan about it again. I love this team. In the 90s is my era of living at large, and I really admired all that kind of stuff. Team that drinks together wins together. Our injuries were beyond what we should have been getting. Right, and I remember when Walter got criticised for it. He said, "Look, we've had sports specialists in here, and they tell us it's just bad luck and whatnot. You can't have 10 years of bad luck. Our players ate shite and drank far too much, and that was the root cause. Their bodies, therefore, weren't recovering. They didn't look after themselves, and they were prone to injury. And it did cost us. There's no doubt about it. They're a wonderful team. They're great characters. We love that."
And that character, yeah. This is the thing. We listen. Be rest assured, we will return to this subject in future weeks. But Smith's creation of team spirit this season doesn't happen without that. So this is the trade-off. Mm-hmm. This season we're seeing here. This, Alan's mentioned that the results against far better technical team in Marseille, that we're hanging in and we're coping, and we were unbeaten. Because of this spirit, and the spirit is fostered by that kind of activity. Spirits lead to spirit, and the way we play, Smith's cohesion as a unit, a ferocious physicality, not in terms of violence, but just in terms of where they put their bodies in the line, a lot of effort, a lot of running, a lot of power trying to match poise in the opposition. That creates this season of dreams, and it very nearly came off. But there will be a bill to pay for that, and it is not a long-term approach to a modern game. And the whole arc of this series, 86 to 98, is one of revolution. The first half is our revolution. There's a bigger revolution taking place, and we think we're part of it right now. On that bus to the airport, and we've got another point, and we're not behind Marseille, blah blah blah. We think we're at the top table. There is a bigger revolution happening in European football, and we aren't seeing it. We are not seeing what's changing, because exactly you say, David. British football, English football, dominated, slapped folk about. Here we go, pick up the trophies and kind of go on. I bet that's now ended. And we aren't quite grasping those lessons, and it's going to be too late before we do, because we're caught up in this momentum. This is a special team. It's a team, I'll talk about it probably more with John and Andy as we wrap up next week. There's probably not a Rangers team more loved, because there's probably not a Rangers team, this is the last Rangers team perhaps, where the fans could feel as connected. They earned a lot more, but not that much more. There was still a connection between the terraces, Durrant and Ferguson and McCoist and McPherson and Gorham, and they were a team that knew the words, and that's going to break off obviously as we get far more foreign players and trying to keep up with the modernisation. So it's much loved, not just because of the success, but because of who they are. So it's a very, very special thing, but we're losing sight of things that are changing.
So with that one, Martyn, David Murray and Walter, was there no one else looking at what else was happening? Because we're at a table, and as you say, there's another door, and through that other door there's a whole other world going on. So is that really on David Murray then to be looking at, okay, we've done this now, but my goodness, look at what's happening elsewhere, and
I think, I'm conscious of time, we've still got some stuff to discuss tonight.
Sorry,
we will come back to this. We absolutely will. And when and where Rangers should have looked at other things. At this minute in time, though, and I've gone through the evidence, no one's complaining.
No, of course not.
one's
And
complaining.
we couldn't see all of this that was going on. And I remember when Arsene Wenger came in England, and the way it was, built into, he wants him to eat pasta. That was a word you heard all the time, sneeringly said about him. How dare he come over here and God, we went through it with Le Guin 10 years later, longer than 10 years later, because he asked players to maybe try and look after their diet a wee bit. And we didn't like that. And we didn't like, as a nation, these foreigners coming over here and, whether, my players aren't found in kebab shops at 4 a.m, completely out their tits, it's one of these things where you're absolutely right. Without this, could we have got to the level we were at?
No.
Probably not. With this, could we get above the level we got to? No, we couldn't. And that's maybe the frustration. But then maybe I'm after what I'm asking for here, what I'm arguing for is nirvana, and it just wasn't possible. And sometimes there are limitations, and you just have to accept them. And we did enjoy the ride, and that is, I think, an important thing. That I think we enjoyed this, and we've got friends who didn't enjoy 55 as much as they should have because they were so worried about it going tits up. That wasn't the set. We all enjoyed this as a support to the maximum. We soaked it in. We took it in. We loved it. We knew what it was. We knew what it meant. And you're right about that beloved team. And I think that's a part of it as well. And that's something I've got no regrets really about, certainly as being a fan, because I loved going to Ibrox. I loved going to away games. I loved watching us pick up trophies. I loved everything about it. And I know that I got the most I can from it. And I think most Rangers fans who were about at that time will tell you the same. Nobody was sitting sweating on, some of the bullshit stuff that we sweat upon now as fans, where people get, livid and panicky about these nonsense. A draw's the end of the world, and we've got to get rid of everybody, or even just the little tertiary things that aren't important, right? Back then, you get your ticket to go to the game, you went to the game, you moaned about it afterwards. And I know I sound old man yelling at clouds, I don't mean to, but what I mean is, as a supporter, you enjoyed the enjoyable moments. And I think that's something, if younger people are listening, take that out of it. Don't wish away periods of success because you don't know what's in the corner.
And this wasn't 3 months either. This wasn't like, the last season. No. This was the
18
whole...
18 months,
And even things as well, like the Copeland Nutter and the whole atmosphere and the...
Yeah.
Well, here's the barometer, right? Here's the barometer. It was then, as it is now. If you want the angriest place to hear Rangers fan reaction, it's Follow, obviously, in printed form in those days.
Close a change,
And then having read 12 years or 10 years of it, because they only came out in 88, it is bizarre. Apart from that, start of the season, what's going on here? Why are we playing so badly? You've got issue after issue with no one's complaining about Rangers. They're complaining about the Super League and Celtic and the SFA, blah, 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 blah. But there's not a complaint about Rangers at all. Not a complaint about Murray, not a complaint about Smith, the team, whatever. Not really, anyway. And it was this little island, this little oasis in 70 odd issues of froth and vitriol and whatever else. And because we were swept up in this, we were at the top table. The next game was, of course, the return as Bruges came to Ibrox in another filthy night, and a game that will be remembered for many reasons indeed.
Trevor Steven with a good ball to Durant. Yes! 6 minutes before half-time, Rangers get the breakthrough. Ian Durant. Well, this is their best move of the game. What a great spotter's badge there from Trevor Steven. Good first touch and a brilliant finish.
No shortage of drama here tonight, or entertainment. It's a quite splendid match. Van der Heyden knocks it forward, danger here. And it's gone in. Starland's scored from absolutely nothing. Steven.
Well done, Trevor Stephen. What a shame he hit that straight into the back of McCall. But Nisbet whips it in. Oh my word! It's a goal by Nisbet. It's the break and the stroke of luck that Rangers needed. It might be the biggest fluke in Europe this season, but who cares? Rangers are back in front.
Right, boys, we'll keep this as concise as possible. A few things to pick up. Let's start with Hateley. He, back in November, gets this phone call from this French agent. He tells to fuck off when he says, he'll be handsomely rewarded if he doesn't play in the 2 Marseille games. He would eventually tell Smith about it at half-time during the Bruges match, by which time, of course, he'd been sent off. He doesn't mention it in his 1994 book. He doesn't mention it until 2011, I think, in that an STV documentary on 92-93. And then, of course, in his very recent book from last year. And Smith and Knox at the half-time are absolutely furious at this Hateley sending off. Smith said, I thought both players went for the ball. I was disappointed by the way the Belgian took the option to feign injury. Even, years later, Smith was confused. He said, I couldn't work out why Hateley was still sent off. I still can't. And of all the suspicions, and John and Andy and I will pick up on other Marseille bits and pieces next week, so we'll keep it for next week. This is the one that stands out. He'd been tangling with Rudy Cossey all night. But he's, by the letter of the law, should have been sent off. He's raised his hand. Now, at the time, and Paul Gascoigne and Gary Mabbitt will tell you about, the use of elbows at the time without much punishment. They had to get their faces reconstructed because of that. Players got away with a lot less, or a lot worse, shall we say. But by the letter of the law, Hateley was rightly sent off. He's an experienced player. He should have known better. Rangers are winning 1-0. A brilliant goal, actually. One of the goals of the season that gets forgotten. Durant. Davey, this story that we comes out, 20 years later. First of all, what do we make of all this? Is Hateley at fault when the dust settles, really?
I suppose there's a big part of me that doesn't want to believe stuff like this, right? Because you just need to look across the city to see what happens when you let this stuff infect you. It takes over your life. But did referees get bribed in this era? Yes. I mean, it happened. There's no doubt about it. Walter famously, of course, Dundee United, 84.
Yeah. And it happened to Marseille as well.
Happened to Marseille, happened to Nottingham Forest, it happened to Tottenham. It happened. It did happen. So we can't deny that the possibility existed that this could happen, because at the time it very much could. So it's not a wild theory to suggest that. Now, something that we have since then, I think, learned a lot more, the dichotomy between how our game is played in the UK as a whole at that time, but particularly in Scotland still to this day, and the way that things are refereed on the continent. Would he have been sent off for that domestically? No, he wouldn't have been. If the referee was looking for a reason to send him off, then Martyn, my love of Richard Nixon and Watergate, someone once said, Nixon said people were out to get him, and they were, but he gave them a lot to get them with. That said, 14-year-old David is apoplectic. Both can be true. The ref could have been bribed. The ref could have been looking to send him off.
And Hateley still gave him something.
And Hateley gave him.
Yeah, and he did.
He was looking for. If he was looking for rope, Hateley handed him one. And a lynching took place. 14-year-old David in the stand that night, I wanted to attack him. Yeah. It's one of the angriest I've ever been at a referee. And remember, folks, I've seen Willie Young and John Beaton, right? But that night I was absolutely beside myself with rage, because it wouldn't have happened domestically. So
it was needless. It was just needless.
It was needless.
And ultimately,
he wanted to leave a bit on the guy, let's be honest, because he did that. He did do that. The guy had needled him. Again, I suppose if you want to take the I'm saying if you want to take the conspiracy theory to the nth degree, you could say maybe he got bribed.
Well,
And
he has
was,
for this to be involved. Yeah, he has to be. He has to be in on that because
he has to be in on
he's
it.
done something stupid. He can be sent off. He was sent off.
He was sent off. That's it. And you're right. This is not a kid. He should have known better. And I don't think you can always play. Well, I wouldn't have been sent off at home for that. You're not playing at home.
Yeah. Alan, it's 1-1. Both goals, the Rangers opener and Lorenzo Stallin's equaliser, beautiful goals actually. Really nice play, interlinking on another filthy night in a dreadful pitch. So, all credit to anyone who can pass a ball on that. Marseille are comfortably ahead against CSKA Moscow. We'll come to that next week. But again, do you really need to bribe CSKA Moscow for your home game, a game that you should win comfortably? And it's looking pretty dismal. It's looking like tonight might be the night, Alan, that we slip up. Now, later in 1993, David and I will know, and other cricket fans will know, that Shane Warne will produce the ball of the century, an incredible leg spin. This was an off spinner from Scott Nisbet that was just about as crazy. I have never seen a goal like that before or since, and older guys, basically older than a 12-year-old boy, were telling me our names in the cup, and you just believe what grown-ups tell you. But it's those kind of moments that inflate that sense of manifest destiny, doesn't it?
Yeah, you just felt it, Martyn. And as you say, the way the ball just spun up, didn't it, the right hand side, Big Nizzy, and then it wasn't even like a few inches. The actual spin on it and over the top of the goalkeeper. I think, if I remember as well, the celebration was a kind of an Andy Murray at Wimbledon type of running up to the side, but Big Nizzy didn't run down to the dugout or something. Time, but yeah, coming back,
nobody knew what to do. It was insane.
And that was the thing. It was just you definitely felt that one. So you're suddenly, well, it's going to go down now, obviously to the kind of next one, but. No, it was the league pretty much fine. Domestically, will be okay, and it's Chizo. Here's another one, and a good victory for us. And as you say, you'll talk about the other one. 6 goals at home for Marseille seemed interesting, but hey. But no, brilliant. And this was just, as I say, all through this season. I remember at work and everything. That was all we were just talking about. It's just Rangers. Every newspaper you read as well. I don't know, it was just dreamland and even all of the stuff that we look at as well, highlights and so on, all of the Trevor Stephen, the class, Weegerant running through McCall, the whole, this year in particular, of all of those greats, if I had to picture each of the players, Miko doing stuff, this just captures it all, Martyn, and more,
Fans love a narrative, David, don't they? We want to buy in, we want to feed in evidence our sense that it's going to happen. Things like that don't happen to teams that don't go to win it.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. I've never seen a goal like it before or since. It was a freak. It was just, I mean, the distance for the spin and the spin on that pitch as well, and everything about it. And I remember just, it's a standard clearance, and then it was one of the. Have you ever known a goal to take as long to go in because we had the time to? And yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course we do. We want to reassure ourselves that this could happen. This not only could this is going to happen. Let's look at the evidence that it's going to happen. And yeah, look, I was caught up in that. Our name's on it. That was 100% something I believed in, and it was also the player who'd done it. Scott Nisbet is a Champions League goal, and I'm not denigrating Nizzy. I think he's quite an underrated player. He played in good teams and he won a lot of stuff. And I think that sometimes we can be a little.
Souness was happy to keep him about,
Correct, and play him everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only place he never played was goalkeeper, and he had a long run at Ibrox. So no, I don't. I think we can be very, especially with Scottish players. Alan mentioned it earlier. Especially with Scottish players, we can do them down a wee bit, and not hold them in the esteem. And I hold Scott Nisbet in high esteem because, as I say, do you want me to get his medals out, folks? I think it'll take a wee while for him to show you around them all. But he's not the guy I think about when I think about huge goals in the Champions League. But for him to do it, the right back, the the guy who's filled in everywhere, and he scores this spawny, incredible, wild goal on a spawny, incredible, wild moment. Yeah, of course. Listen, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with this whatsoever to start dreaming and going, well, look, that kind of thing.
Was the final going to be in Munich, David?
It was.
Because I remember coming back from this and actually getting the okay from Margaret, myself, David Bess and Barry. We were going to fly over, and that's how daft it was.
No, I'd been to Bruges. I was not allowed to go to France. I think my mum had put a foot down there, but we were going to Munich. That was agreed. The boss had given us both passes because it just felt that way. Rangers felt unstoppable, but of course it would stop and it had to stop at Parkhead of all places. And for Nisbet, and in the following Saturday, he lasted 30 minutes of that game, came off with a pelvic injury, and would never play for Rangers again. Never play football again. His career would end because of that injury, sadly. And so would Rangers. A 44-game unbeaten run on the 20th of March. It was insipid. It was tired. Celtic were just up for it, as they tended to be or could be at the end of a season when it was a kind of meaninless.
When they were fooling themselves that they were just a couple of players away in the summer. When Rangers were shattered and had already achieved a trophy and were looking at winning other ones and didn't. Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. But we were shite. Look,
we were.
You wanted me to be brave. You wanted
Andy Payton, bloody hell,
yeah.
Andy Payton. I mean, come on, that guy. He looked like somebody who cleans the cars at a used car dealership, and he normally played like that as well. Yeah. But maybe it was in the stars again that was how that run was going to end. But this team were shattered, and their eye was not. I know people must be going, their eyes weren't in an Old Firm game, and you'll get people who get angry and say, an Old Firm game.
Oh, get used to guys, that at that stage of the
season. Guys, we didn't give a toss about it, and apart and it Alan mentioned earlier the seismic reaction when we drop a point these days. I don't remember that one being, disappointing on the day.
Well, there's another story about being there. It was a disgrace that day.
We were rubbish.
No, the performance was a disgrace. Parkhead was a disgrace.
It was a lot of
chat about tickets being taken in, but not the stubs ripped off and then being resold outside. There's far too many bears in there. I had to get lifted up and kind of carried down to the bottom, then we kind of moved to the other side of the terrace. And it's a bit of a nightmare of a day. I do remember, people weren't furious and they were a bit despondent. No one likes losing there, ever. And we had this run, could we do it for the rest of the season, So to say that it didn't matter is a bit rewriting, but we got over it pretty quickly because the game's kind of coming. Anyway, guys.
Alan said earlier, there was always something coming over the hill.
I know there was that season. It's been a long one tonight, but we've had a good chat. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks, Martin. Enjoyed it. Thanks again, David.
Cheers, Davey.
Thank you to both. That was a lot of fun. I hope the listeners enjoyed it. I certainly did.
After 44 games without defeat, one of the greatest Rangers sides of all time had finally been overcome, and it made no difference to the league title race. Rangers still finished today 7 points clear, 2 points for a win in those days, of course, but that momentum had been curbed, as did the feeling of invincibility and manifest destiny. That game at Parkhead was the 50th match that Rangers had played, and it was not yet April. With players either dropping down or playing through barriers that they shouldn't have been, this season of endurance was starting to take its toll. Many in the Scottish footballing community were keen to speculate that the Rangers' dream machine was finally running out of spare parts. To see how it got on, join us next week. Until then, bye for now.